Evening, guys. All right, so this week's check-in is just me. Alice is on holiday for another week. She will be joining us again for hopefully for the next one. But you've got me for the time being. So first of all, I'm going to go through a couple of things that were in the check-in forms. Just going through a few points to try and help you sort of address some of the issues, and then talk about the app and why we encourage you to use the app and tracking. And then also I'm going to introduce sort of the things that we're going to look at next week that will help with making progress. So going to dive straight in. The first thing that a couple of you have perhaps maybe struggled with, or not struggled, but certainly have been trying to work on, is trying to increase fiber intake. Fiber has loads of benefits. In terms of health, it's really important to help with the digestive system. It helps maintain a good, healthy gut microbiome. But it's also got sort of benefits in terms of controlling things like your cholesterol. So a high fiber diet has been shown to help reduce cholesterol, and it has reduced the risk of all sorts of other illnesses and diseases. So things like cancers, certain cancers, heart disease, risk of stroke, risk of diabetes. Just increasing your fiber intake by, or hitting the 25 to 35 grams per day, which are recommended, can massively have an impact and reduce your risk of all-cause mortality. And that's the risk of anything causing death, okay? So increasing your fiber is important. Ideally, we want somewhere between 25 and 35 grams. If we're in a deficit, if we get slightly less than that, then that's okay. That is certainly going to help with digestion. But trying to get that 25 to 35 grams is going to massively benefit you. It'll also benefit you in terms of maintaining that calorie deficit. So fiber tends to be filling. It also slows down our digestion, so we feel fuller for longer. So it's satiating. So increasing fiber that way is going to give you more volume within your food for fewer calories, and then helps to keep you feeling fuller for longer. There are two different types. We've got soluble fiber, which is the stuff that we get from things like whole grains and our vegetables. And that is something that can help speed through the stuff within our gut and help reduce the risk of things like constipation. That's insoluble fiber. And then we get soluble fiber, which is the stuff we find in things like beans and lentils. And that can help bind food and make our stools more solid and reduce the risk of things like diarrhea. So we need a range of fiber. We need it from all sorts of different sources. So nuts and seeds, pulses like your beans, lentils, and then also things like nuts and seeds, and then our vegetables and fruit as well. And this is why we aim for that sort of 5 a day. 5 pieces of fruit and vegetable a day will help you maintain that higher fiber intake. Now, I put some resources up into the app so you can have a look at some high fiber foods. So those include things like nuts and seeds, but you've also got your berries. So raspberries are a particular favorite of mine, because 100 grams of raspberries provides around about 7 grams of fiber for only 45 calories. Blackberries are the same, blueberries, strawberries, they all contain fiber, as do all your other fruits. Things like whole grains, so going for things like whole grain bread or pasta, things like that will help increase your fiber. But you also get your pulses, so beans and lentils. Adding those into our foods is a good way of doing that. We can get fiber foods as well, so things like bran flakes or sometimes crisp breads, whole grain crisp breads can actually help increase that fiber intake as well. And looking at things like wholemeal wraps, wholemeal bread. Okay, so those are all good ways of increasing our fiber just by making a few simple switches. One of the easiest things I do is adding things like chia seeds or flax seeds into my breakfast. So if I have yogurt, I'll mix flax seeds in. If I'm having overnight oats, I'll put some chia seeds in there. I'll add them into smoothies, into porridges and things like that, just to help give me that boost. And my aim at the moment is to hit that 35 to 40 grams, and I do that by adding those little things in. Adding a few nuts on top of the salads. Just a small handful, maybe 15 grams of nuts on top of salads is going to give you an extra couple of grams of fiber. Adding fruit into your overnight oats, or adding fruit into salads and stuff like that. Okay, so have a look, check out those examples, and I did an example of food for a day as well, just to give you some ideas. The other thing that was raised was like this mid-afternoon slump, and I know a few of you have mentioned that before. So the mid-afternoon slump is you get to 3 or 4 o'clock and your energy levels can sometimes drop. There are a couple of reasons for this. Okay, there are a couple of reasons. The first one is perhaps you might not be having enough calories earlier on in the day. So one of the things I do encourage is if you've got a calorie target, to eat at least half of your calories by the time you get to your evening meal. So if you've got a calorie target of say 1800 calories, then aiming to eat around 1000 calories before you get to your evening meal. That gives us plenty to have for our evening meal. So you're getting sort of 800 calories for the evening meal and any possible snacks that you might want. One of the risks when we're on a fat loss phase is that we try and reduce the number of calories earlier on in the day, thinking we're going to eat more at night. But the reason we eat more at night is because we're hungry, because we've not eaten enough earlier on in the day. So making sure that you get a good breakfast, maybe a 400 to 500 calorie breakfast, and the same for lunch, will mean that you are more full for the evening meal, especially if you're getting your protein in and you're getting your fiber. The other thing that can cause it sometimes as well is having carb levels roughly the same as protein at your lunch. So if you look at your lunch and if the number of grams of protein and the number of grams of carbs are the same, then that combination can sometimes cause that slump. So protein and carbohydrates can cause insulin levels to rise. Carbohydrates can cause your blood sugars to increase as well. And when insulin is high and blood sugars are high, it makes the body pull the sugars into our muscles and our liver, and we can get that kind of sudden drop within our blood sugar levels. And that's what sometimes leads to that kind of mid-afternoon slump, 3-4 o'clock, where we feel tired and we then reach for things like the biscuits and the chocolate, because our body is making us want high energy density food like those biscuits and chocolates and crisps. Okay, so we know from experience that they give us, and they've got a lot of energy in there, and our body craves that. So to combat that, there are a couple of things you can do. The first one is to reduce the carbohydrate intake at lunchtime. So if you're having things like sandwiches, perhaps instead of using normal bread, you can look at sandwich thins or a wrap. If you're having things like pasta and rice, perhaps reducing the portion of pasta that you have in there. So instead of say a normal portion, which might be 75, 80 grams, you only have 50 grams in there, and increase your protein. So having a protein rich and a slightly carb reduced meal, so something like a chicken salad or roasted vegetables with your protein source, or even having a wrap that is absolutely rammed full of protein and salad with some fruit on the side, that is going to help sort of reduce that slump. You could also replace, so if you're using white carbohydrates, so things like white bread or white rice, perhaps looking for a whole grain or a brown option. So brown rice, wholemeal bread, whole grain bread, wholemeal wraps. They are slower releasing carbs, so you tend to get a reduced spike of your blood sugars as well, which can help reduce the insulin spike that you would get from the carbohydrates. So trying something like that. Or if you are somebody that does need that afternoon snack, then plan it in and have options. Look for things that are going to be filling, so a high protein snack or a couple of pieces of fruit that aren't going to give you enough energy to keep going, but aren't going to be that energy dense foods. So plan ahead, and again, that comes back to planning. Planning is important. Okay, the other one was tracking food. So tracking food, Alice put a couple of tips up at the start with helping that. One of the things that I like to do, or there's two things really. Number one, I try and be consistent with the meals across the week. And what I mean by that is having a very similar breakfast or similar lunch across that week. And it just makes it a lot easier to track, because once you've entered it for one day, you can then just copy it across the days of the week as well. And that doesn't mean that you necessarily are going to get bored with your food. You can add variation in there. So if, let's say, for example, you do your overnight oats as a base, you can add different fruits to give variety. If you're doing sandwiches or something like that for your lunches, or a salad, you can have a base salad and then you can add your different protein source. So you might have a base salad with chicken or with salmon fillet, for example, or a tuna, but having those. Or the other way of doing it is if you're having an evening meal and you've batch cooked it and you have the same thing again for your lunch the next day, then you can copy those meals across. That's quite easy to do in a lot of these apps. You can just copy a meal, save it as a meal and copy it across. The other thing that I do as well is I enter the meals for the following day the night before. And that has a few benefits. One, I know I've tracked my food. So I enter what I can for the next day. It gives me an idea of how many calories I'm eating and how many I've got left for other things. And it also gives me an idea of how much protein I'm getting in and whether I need to make any adjustments and amendments. But I do that when I've got some downtime in the evening. So perhaps when I'm watching telly, and it just takes 5 minutes just to go through rather than trying to track your food as you're making the meals. So the other thing that you can do as well, obviously save meals, make recipes up there, save them consistently and add them in. But I just want to reassure you that tracking does get easier because of that. The apps tend to recognize the foods you eat so that when you enter them again, it's there and you just put them in. Now, when you're tracking your meals, what I tend to do is have a notepad. So rather than enter it into my app straight away, I'll just have a notepad. I always have my scales out and I just prepare the veg or whatever, put it into a bowl, write down the weight, and then I can track that later. All right. But use the other things there. So if you're using things with a barcode, scan it, weigh it, track it. All right. And it does get easy. The more you do it, the easier it gets, the faster you get. And it's like with anything, it's a skill that we need to practice. And it is a skill that's very, very useful for helping you monitor your food intake. So I hope those help. Next one, coaching and kind of the app, using the app and getting the most out of it. So the app is there to help us help you. Okay, so you tracking your metrics, so tracking your weight, tracking your workouts, tracking your measurements, steps, things like that, and then filling in the form help us keep an eye on how you're doing. So we can offer advice as we go through it. I do check through what you're doing and I do have a look at what you're entering, how your steps are doing, how the calories and things are doing. You entering that there means that we've got more information to give you advice. So the check-in forms are a good starting point, but then actually looking at what you're doing and how many calories you're eating, things like that, allows us to kind of check to see how you're doing. So do put the information in. It's also good for you to monitor it. It's an accountability for you. If you are entering this stuff in, then it holds you accountable. You're more likely to keep doing it. And it's all part of this building habits and routines. So the more you do it, the more it sticks, the more likely you are going to keep doing it as well and embed those habits and routines, which is what you need to do to sustain the results that you're looking for. Also through the app, you can reach out and ask for help. And that's another thing as well. So if you are struggling with things, the people who are most likely to succeed in this, and I've been doing this for 6 years, and those who are most likely to succeed are the ones who ask for help when they're struggling, rather than thinking that they failed and kind of almost, I call it ostrich syndrome, almost burying your head in the sand. Rather than thinking that you failed, actually say, look, I'm having some difficulties here. Can you offer advice? And like I say, I've been doing this for 6 years. There's lots of situations I've seen. In fact, there's hardly anything I haven't seen. So there's always something that we can do to help make it easier. This is tough. I'm not going to lie. Changing habits is hard because that's what we're doing. Your habits and routines are what have got you to where you to a point where you want to change and you want to change those habits and routines. But you're fighting against what you have always done. And we need to work at that. That is something that you've got to put effort in. And I remember sort of reading it, I've read it a few times, this statement of, you can either put the hard work in now or you have to suffer with hard work later. And, you put the hard work in now and you find life easier later, or you do the easy thing now and you find life hard later. And that's something that resonates with me, which is why I keep putting the effort in now to make sure that I reap the benefits later. Okay, so I hope those tips help with some of the points that you've raised. Next week, I want to focus on three things, okay? The big one is sleep. Sleep is something that is missed quite often when it comes to coaching programs, but it is something that is really important. Sleep is important for rest, recovery, repair within the body, especially when we're training. It's important for helping our brain function and cognitive function, helping us focus and be more alert. It's also important to help manage our appetite. Sleep is part of something called the parasympathetic system. And part of that as well are our hunger hormones. So ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is the hormone that makes you feel hungry. Leptin is the hormone that makes you feel full. If we don't sleep, if we don't get enough sleep, and ideally most people, and I say most people because some people need more or less than this, but most people need 7 to 9 hours worth of sleep. And, you know, if we're getting that, then great. Some people can function on slightly less. Some people need a little bit more, but most people 7 to 9 hours sleep. And I'll give more information on that throughout the week as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But if we don't get enough sleep, it increases the amount of ghrelin that we produce. So we feel hungrier, and it reduces our ability to respond to leptin. So we don't feel full. So it's a double whammy thing. We eat more and we don't feel full. And it makes sense. If we're not getting enough sleep, we can feel like we're lacking energy. So we want to eat more to get that energy up because we are tired. So if we get that sleep in, it makes it much easier to kind of control the appetite. It also allows us to be more focused and sharper in our thoughts, so we're more likely to make better decisions when it comes to our nutrition. Okay, so having that sleep in there, working on that is something that is important. And there are going to be a couple of things that we'll put up, but the main thing is having a good sleep routine, a good bedtime routine. And one of the things I really encourage people to do is reduce screen time for about 45 minutes before you go to bed. So that's things like turning your telly off, turning your phone off, turning laptops off, things like that. Trying to reduce the amount of screen time you have. And we all do it. We sit there in front of the TV at night, or we're scrolling through our phone in bed. Actually removing that and making a bedtime routine where we might have a bath or a shower, where we, go through doing our facial routine, brushing our teeth, prepping stuff for the next day. Having that as a routine before you go to bed helps your body understand that it's time to go to bed. Having that consistent routine and doing that means that when you get into bed, you're more likely to get to sleep quicker. There are also other things. So there are things like meditation, mindfulness. You could have kind of a check-in with yourself every evening just to see how you've done. So review your day, set yourself goals for the next day. And having this as a process does help you focus your thoughts, gets your brain ready to go to sleep. But I'll give you a few more tips and advice on that. And sleep's difficult. It's not something that is going to come straight away. If you do struggle with your sleep at times, and there will be periods where you get more and less sleep, because our life changes, things change. But actually working on it is something that is really, really beneficial. So next thing we're going to focus on is fats as well, healthy fats. I'm going to give you some tips and advice to actually get enough fat into our diet. I'm guilty of this. I have been guilty of this in the past. When I've wanted to go into a weight loss phase, I've cut all fats out. And there are health issues with this. There are going to be impacts on our health with this that we need to be aware of. We need fats in our diet for hormone health, for our immune system, as well as all sorts of other functions within the body. Ideally, we need to be eating around about 0.5 grams per kilogram of body weight as a minimum, all right? Up to around about 1 to 1.2 grams per kilo. So if you weigh 80 kilos, then you need somewhere between 40 as a minimum and 80 to 85 grams of fat per day. Now, if you're in a fat loss phase, slightly reducing your fat intake, so it's closer to the 0.5, I would recommend 0.7 for women, if we're going to be looking at a precise target. But again, this is, it doesn't have to be exact. It's within a range. So 0.5 to 0.8 as a range is fine. Having that will help our body function better. In terms of appetite, fat can also help keep us feeling fuller for longer. Yes, it is calorie dense, so we have to be aware of it. It contains 9 calories per gram, but we do need to make sure that we do get enough fats in our diet so that we feel fuller for longer. It slows the emptying of our stomach. So if we combine fats with carbohydrates, for example, it can slow the release of those carbohydrates into our bloodstream, so that we feel less, or we get that, we don't get that slump. So that's another tip back into the first one as well. So that afternoon slump, if we put some fats with our lunches, it can slow the release of carbs into our bloodstream so that we don't get that mid-afternoon slump as much. But yeah, they help slow the emptying of the stomach, make us feel fuller for longer. What you can eat for fats? Well, ideally, we want to make sure we get more unsaturated fats. So again, unsaturated fats are important for brain function, but they also help reduce cholesterol levels. So, cutting fat out to try and reduce cholesterol level is not something that's a good idea. We want unsaturated fats, particularly polyunsaturated fats like we get from oily fish. That is something that is going to benefit our heart health as well. Nuts and seeds are good sources. You've got olives, vegetable oil. So olive oil is a good source of fat. Like I say, salmon, mackerel, sardines, oily fish like that, fresh tuna, they all contain some healthy fats. Avocado as well is a particularly good healthy source. We do need some saturated fats, so things like dairy products, yogurts, milk, cheese, and then they are good nutrient dense foods, and they do have some healthy saturated fats. But we should reduce our intake of butter. Butter used to be considered a healthy fat. Studies have now shown that it's linked to an increase in cholesterol levels, or our LDL levels of cholesterol, our bad cholesterol. So perhaps reducing the amount of butter we use is something that we might consider as well. But keep your eyes open for more advice on fats. Then the last one is vitamins and supplements, and I'm not going to talk about it here, but I'm going to put a post up in the next couple of days on vitamins and supplements. The key thing here is that most of us don't need very many vitamins or supplements at all. The one I will mention now is vitamin D, and it's particularly important at this time of year. Vitamin D we produce predominantly from exposure to the sun. Now in the UK, October till March, there isn't enough sunlight, direct sunlight, for us to produce vitamin D. It's too low in the sky, and the atmosphere absorbs the ultraviolet radiation, which triggers the production of vitamin D. So we do need to supplement. We can get some from food. So dairy products contain vitamin D. There are some sort of vegetables like mushrooms. If you eat mushrooms, a lot of those are enriched with vitamin D. But we do need to perhaps supplement, and getting a supplement that's somewhere between 1,000 to 2,000 IUs, so that's 25 to 50 micrograms of vitamin D per day. It's a cheap supplement. You can go and get it from anywhere. Amazon has got some good ones on there as well, and I'll put the one that I use up. I use the 2,000 IU because I do suffer with seasonal affective disorder, and that's the thing with vitamin D. It can help boost mood, boost immunity, can help with fat loss as well. Okay, so that's the one supplement I'm going to sort of mention here, but there are a couple of others, and I'll mention them throughout the week. But in terms of all the other stuff that's out there and people trying to sell you supplements, very few of them have got any evidence or research to back up the claims that a lot of companies actually do. All right, so that's that. As ever, if you've got any questions, drop me a message. Keep your eyes peeled in the group on the app for for all sorts of lessons and things throughout the week. I'm going to keep posting those up. There's going to be more on habits as well. So we'll look at different ways of kind of embedding habits and making them stick. And I'll sort of keep checking in with you throughout the week. Have a great weekend, guys. Enjoy the rest of it. Have a great week next week, and I will be in touch.